Okay. All right. Launches with haunches. All right. We did it. I think this is happening. It is game on yet again, yet again.
Welcome to Haunches. I'm Lee Scott.
Yeah, me too.
It's like we have 4 guests on the show. You, me, and both your thighs. Welcome to Uncarcerated.
I want to say thank you because right before we got on here, Lee said, it looks like they're not quite as white as last time.
We got a lot of
Like they got
feedback
some-
about the show last week, and all of it was about your legs. People left comments. They were like, please, both of you should wear pants. There was a whole situation about it.
Sure. It was Thigh-gate.
Well, what I have found interesting is I felt like the 90s, the huge shorts thing in the 90s, like size 50 jean codes, was a backlash to our generation. We grew up, our parents put us in the shortest shorts possible, and they were made of terry cloth. It was like our family could take these short shorts off and then clean up a spill and then put them back on us again. But I've noticed as we get older, our shorts are going back to being short again.
Yep, the diaper is next.
It is.
Yeah,
It's the only logical conclusion is that you will eventually have a diaper.
It'll just keep slowly climbing until that's just all I wear.
That's the circle of life.
Indeed.
Circle of thighs. All right, so we've got a jam-packed show. We want to talk about quite a few things. One topic in particular, we'll get to that in a second. First, just some general, this is what's going on in our life situation and housekeeping. First of all, welcome to Uncarcerated, the show that follows people's journey into and home from the criminal justice system. We use that term loosely. We also talk to people in the world of prison reform. We are about everything that sends less people to prison and makes their conditions livable and improves their lives, which is what the word corrections is there intended to do, and it doesn't. So Kevin and I have dedicated our lives to criminal justice reform and social justice and economic justice, and we decided to do this show, and we're really proud of it, and we're growing it. And thanks to the Civic Media Center in Gainesville and WGOT Gainesville Community Radio for lending us space to do the show. Please follow us at Uncarcerated. And please hit that little subscribe button and leave a comment, because just that extra few seconds means that so many more people will see it. If you hit that button, like 5 more people will see this, and it becomes not difficult to find.
Sure.
So Kev, I don't know how your week's been, but I want to tell you, I got home this morning from my girlfriend's house. Yes, I have a girlfriend. I know that's hard to believe. It is. Just scoot past that fact.
She know that?
She does not know.
Okay.
And I pulled into my yard. There was a massive head-on collision right on the road, the major highway that runs by my house. Cops lined up in front of my house, 2 city vehicles in my driveway. And I want to talk about that feeling of terror when you see those flashing red and blue lights and they're at your house. Turns out my neighbor's 700-pound bull got loose, caused an accident, and then hightailed it through my yard. So as of right now, as of 3:30, it is still loose still on the loose. I'm terrified to walk my dog. I was trapped in my house for quite a good while. My landlord, who lives very close to me, was like, "Oh, it's a big sweetie," and I'm like, "It's 700 pounds."
Wasn't Loose Bull your grinder handle also?
Yeah, Loose Bull is also my nickname on Grindr.
Awesome. That's crazy. That feeling of, oh shit, the cops are here.
Yeah, and I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't done anything like crime wrong, like, like being an emotional 5-year-old, yes, but like criminally, I haven't done anything wrong. And I've been sober. I take good care of myself. I try to make my little community better if I can. I haven't done anything that would be arrestable in years. 7-8 years of my life have been above board, and I've only been pulled over one time, and I sat in my car for like a good half hour and cried my eyes out after he left. I just was completely devastated because I hadn't processed all of that trauma. Just to give the listeners a little bit of background, my 2 big run-ins with the criminal justice world were self-inflicted. Both were a string of suicide attempts where I was inhaling computer duster after long bouts of depression and sent to mental health facilities. And each one of those incidents could be dealt with in different ways. Sometimes I would wake up and a roam ambulance would take me to a mental hospital or the hospital. And other times I'd woke up with guns pointed at me or being kicked awake or punched awake by police officers. And I haven't dealt with any of this really. I've very cursory looks at it in therapy. My therapist deals with other stuff I've dealt with, like the death of my wife or the death of my daughter, which is pretty recent. But she's never had a client who has had these issues, you know, and so she's kind of like, I don't know what to tell you, but you know, it was like when I got pulled over, I didn't even get a ticket. He just let me go. But it was like all of those feelings just came swimming to the surface of all those incidents piled onto one. And so now, you know, seeing a cop in your driveway, it's like seeing a shark in the ocean. You know, I might not get bit, but I know it's there, you know? And I just wanted to talk about that for a minute and talk about maybe some of your incidents since you've been home. Have you had that feeling like I'm being followed in traffic, or the cops are going to show up, or someone's going to plant evidence at my house, or, you know, like if you had that feeling?
I've only had that feeling 1,000 times.
Okay.
Since I've been home. No, I think, and I actually I think that what we're gonna get into is actually really very relevant to this, like in terms of like the lingering trauma, the ugliness, just the sinister nature of the system, and then like sort of the lasting impact and how that kind of echoes through your freedom afterward. I've had that too, where like driving somewhere, you see a cop, you suddenly become, oh shit, am I doing something? Like I'm not doing anything. But that instant terror, that sort of like fear of in your mind, whether it's conscious or subconscious, you have an association with the system and all of the trauma that you've been through. It's the reality of your incarceration period, the 6 zillion inhumane things that happened during that time, all of the struggles since that, you know, it kind of brings your whole life back into all of your incarceral life back into focus. I had something like maybe a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe 2 months ago, where I was away from home. I think I left early, maybe went to the gym or something like that to work on my thighs before going to work.
Thigh master. I assume that you have a thigh master.
I have nothing, but I have a room.
Also my nickname on Grindr.
I have a room full of thigh masters.
No, we'll cut this out in post.
No, we won't. I had left, maybe went to the gym or something. Anyway, my girlfriend was like, oh, like there's a bunch of cops all over the neighborhood here. And I was like, oh shit, like, you know, immediately my thought was they're looking for me. I had done nothing. I was just away. I was just living my life. There's no actual reason to think that, but that knee-jerk reaction was like the paranoia, the fear, you know, is so huge because of the trauma of my life experience that like that was my initial thought. Turned out it was something completely different, had nothing to do with me, of course, but like that sort of like charge was like immediate and like very big and lasted for like a little while. So you know, for people to maybe keep it in their minds that like just because somebody's home, you know, maybe out of a cage doesn't mean that all of them is out of the cage. Some part of me still remains in that experience somewhat. So
and that's another level, like the inner terror and fear, and this stuff is like super hard to talk about it. Like we're talking about it openly because I love you dearly, and we want to share this stuff with people who can relate or people who maybe can't, so you can kind of get an inside sort of the inside picture of what goes on. But I've rarely talked about this publicly, but what you alluded to is another level. It's the outer terror, the shame and the guilt associated with having incidents with police officers or being arrested. I had something very similar just a few weeks ago. My girlfriend called and said, hey, my entire neighborhood is on lockdown. There's SWAT, there's helicopters. And my very first sentence was, I'm so sorry, I didn't do anything. You know, like I had just left at like 5 a.m. and like I felt like I had to tell her, like, I didn't like rob your neighbor's house or something. You know what I mean?
It wasn't me. Yeah.
And she was like, of course you didn't. And she found out later that like apparently there was some armed standoff with a neighbor and a naked guy running through the woods. It was a whole thing, and it wasn't me this time.
No, it was me.
It was
Sorry.
Kevin.
Sorry.
But like, so there's the inner terror, right? And then there's the outward shame and embarrassment. And then there's the actual courtroom stuff, which is I woke up passed out and or got pulled over, and the struggle to handcuff me or to wake me up became not resisting arrest, but battery on a public officer. Stealing a can of Duster from a grocery store became robbery. That's what's on my record. If you just took the first glance at my record, there's robbery and battery on there. I've never like hit another person in my life, you know? And the way that it was explained to me by the public defender was, if it's resisting, it's battery. If it's battery, it's aggravated battery. Anytime you have law enforcement involved, they one up it. They increase the level. And, you know, the opposing view would be, well, Lee, you stole a can of Duster. Lee, you were doing harm to your body. You could have done any number of things, like hit someone in a vehicle or whatever it is. That's the argument that, you know, you should be, you know, you hear this all the time when you're talking about police brutality incidents. The opposing view is, well, I would never do that because I would just lay still and I would do exactly what the officer tells me, right?
Of course.
But that's not what happens when you're depressed and mentally unstable and you wake up with guns pointed at you, or you're being dragged out of a vehicle. You don't know what to think.
That's not how life
you know.
Works. Yeah, that's not how it actually goes at all. And you know, you said something earlier too. Like what you're talking about is like super unique. This is not like a common experience in the world. It's not like most people have had this interaction with law enforcement or this experience, so that like when you go to seek help later, if you're able to, if you are fortunate enough to be able to connect with some mental health resources, it's hard to find somebody who understands, who has like experience talking to someone who's been through it. You kind of said like this person was like, oh, like that's not like, you know, helping you with some other stuff. Don't really know too much about that. Same for me. When I went to the crisis center, I was feeling like suicidal after being home from prison for a couple of years, few years maybe. I was still like just so ate up with all of that I had experienced. I had never processed it. It was like eating me alive, depressed, anxious, just like complete, like hopeless. Like there's nothing for me in this world. Who am I kidding? Like my life is over. I am forever going to be whatever it may be. And so like I finally went to go talk to somebody. She's amazing. I still talk to her today, years later. We still have standing appointments, but you know, this is not her background either. Like she's learned a lot since. I think that it's kind of been like a mutually beneficial thing that we sort of like, you know, helped each other in some ways. But it's very hard to find someone who has that area of expertise because it doesn't really exist. And I mean, I think what we're going to talk about shortly too is like you can see like the system itself isn't based on an environment or even the idea of actual correction or help or support. Like in fact, like as advertised, it is the total opposite.
Yeah, it's almost exclusively punitive, from the courtroom through the prison system and the jails,
to the tutor.
From the rooter to the tutor. And not only is it punitive, but then your survival skills, which if you were exposed to abuse, emotionally, physically, sexually, if you were exposed to high levels of poverty or stress, you know, studies have shown that your response to things that are perceived as aggressive or not helpful, your response isn't always great. You know, like your survival skills are like not super adept. You don't have a high level of diplomacy, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people become reactionary and end up worse than when they got in trouble in the first place. You get what should have been dealt with the mental health facilities or some sort of support, from driving on a suspended license to all sorts of nonviolent crimes that could have been dealt with one way, send you through this system, expose you to abuse, up your charges and then spit you out and expect that you're just going to be okay.
I think I've used this analogy 1,000 times, maybe even on the show, but like if you consider like society or community as like a whole body, for example, like there's some part of it that is in need of some like attention, some healing in some way. Say it's a finger. That becomes apparent. This finger is in need of some, healing, some support or something. You certainly wouldn't cut off the finger and go put it in a box way over there and then pay someone to abuse it for a long time and then sew it back onto your body after a long time and then like curse the finger for its failure.
Yeah, real John Wayne Bobbitt situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you would not.
I'm great with late 80s jokes, by the way.
Very good. Everyone watching is like, who the fuck is who's
Google it?
Yeah, who's that? Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't like, remove something, cause more harm to it, return it to its original setting, and then demonize and damn that thing for its failure, for its lack of health. You obviously have made it worse and now gave it an even harder existence moving ahead. So I mean, there's no way to sell that as like, yeah, that was a good idea. Like it's never going to work.
Right. It doesn't work.
And like we feel like, I mean, my idea of looking at this is like, we've tried this experiment a zillion times. It is clearly not working, yet we just continue to keep doing it. We're just going to keep doing the same exact thing. We're going to keep getting the same results. So.
And there's so many reasons why we don't alter the system. Financially, it works for people. The levels of economic, social, and racial justice that are involved in why the powers that be wouldn't fix the system are there. The fact that a lot of these topics have nuance and complex gray areas, and we don't think that way as a society. I mean, take immigration, for instance, extremely complicated problem, if it is even a problem, but it's an extremely complicated dialogue, but people want bumper sticker slogans like build a wall, right? and so we never actually get to fixing a problem or coming up with solutions that are humane and work for everybody involved. And it's the same thing with the criminal justice system. It's easier to say you did the crime, do the time, right? Lock them up, throw away the key. It's easier to say that. And the levels of poverty and mental health that go into producing these problems in the first place are so much harder to deal with than just let's throw people in a cage. And by the way, this kind of leads us to what our topic is going to be today. The inner city problems and the rural poverty problems, I don't think it's accidental that if you grow up in a rural area, your chances of either being in prison or working at a prison are pretty high. Mm-hmm. And so what you end up having is like people who grew up in these areas that end up destitute and don't have any way out and don't have any like cultural references that would make them even want to have a way out, right? There's almost sort of that clannish pride in like, we don't need your libraries around here.
Oh, clannish,
right?
I see what you did.
And so you end up getting in trouble, or you end up watching your cousin while he's in trouble. And
who's also your dad.
Right. Cousin, also your brother and your father. So we're going to do a little screen share in just a second, but I want to throw out some numbers so we can have this conversation. So we had this conversation to have this conversation, which is just a couple weeks ago, Kevin sent me a text message and it was a picture.
It is like last week. This like just happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last week, it was like right after the show, right after the last show we did. Yep. So Kevin sent me a picture. It was a screenshot of a flyer at a local college campus recruiting day from the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, and I guess there were like somebody that we know was there and took a photo of this and said there were like quite a few law enforcement agencies there.
Right on cue.
There we go. That were actively recruiting at the college. And this one particular photo, which we'll share in a second, says so much. And this was the advertising that they were using to get people to come work at a very specific, not just a prison, but actually a very specific one.
So in the state of Florida, there are 176,000 people in prison. 350,000 people pass through jails and prisons every year in the state of Florida. The Department of Corrections has 143 facilities statewide, including 50 correctional institutions, 7 private institutions, 16 annexes, 33 work camps, 3 reentry centers, only 3 reentry centers. Not a lot of plans for people coming home. 12 FDC operated work release centers. So get 50 correctional institutions, only 12 work release centers.
And a partridge in a partridge. Yeah,
Is that a song?
No, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
18 private work release centers, 2 road prisons, 1 forestry camp, and 1 basic training camp.
Yeah, it sounds like you hit it perfectly. Like, yeah, where's the reentry? Where's the other side?
Right.
Is there another side?
So
yeah,
you had a rough life. Some things happened. You ended up here. Good luck. It's going to be super violent and punitive and atrocious. And you're going to have no nutrition, no access to any kind of educational materials. And then, oh, is it time for you to go home?
Yeah.
Good luck.
You're out.
Bye.
Get out. Yep. Here's your gate money, which is 0.
Did they do a release plan with you? Did you have to write it up?
No.
Yeah, they did.
No,
Well, like where I was,
no.
they did a release plan, but like you could tell like no one was reading this. So I just like made up hilarious answers because it was like, no one's reading this thing. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. That should be the motto. Department of Corrections. Nobody cares.
Yeah, we're not even pretending. Speaking of not pretending, okay, so let's take a look at this. If we can make this happen with a little screen share here. Let's look at this flyer. So keeping in mind, this was
At a college.
at a college here in Florida. We have quite a few prisons in our immediate vicinity surrounding us here where we are in Alachua County. This was the flyer that somebody had created.
Higher education
And-
using taxpayer dollars.
And had been approved to use this particular flyer for recruitment purposes at a college event. So here is the majestic work that somebody pulled together.
This
So-
is
so-
the United States of America.
So to say the top picture you're seeing was actually one side of the flyer. The bottom section was the other side of the flyer. So certainly, Lee, I'm not sure about you, but my takeaway is that this has been put together by an organization that has my best interest in their hearts, that very much wants to see me succeed, that believes that transforming me is going to happen in a nurturing, caring environment. Certainly nothing menacing or terrorizing about this. Anyone that's interacted with this group of individuals is clearly going to emerge better for it.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this flyer, I think the type of people that you're recruiting, I can't even do the sarcasm thing. I appreciate your sarcasm there. I can't even go there. The type of people that you would want to recruit using this flyer are the type of people that are involved. Let's just be honest. The type of people that are involved on Discord and Telegram with alt-right groups that have thin blue line written all over it, that have a total, this is the overarching theme, Kevin, us versus them. Everything is us versus them.
Correct.
They watch every CBS show there is, SWAT, SUV, Law and Order, Blue Bloods, and all of it is good guys, bad guys. You did the crime and we are here to keep you in line. Literally walk in a straight line, shut the fuck up. If you didn't like it, you shouldn't have come here. What do you think this is? Club Med? We are not here to take care of you, to keep you safe. A real convict would keep their own self safe. We're not here to do any of that. We're here for you to stay out of our way. And the type of people that you're recruiting, who are you speaking to with this? This looks like propaganda from the late 30s Germany. This looks like brown shirt shit, dude.
So we should say too that this flyer was in specific recruiting for a medical facility, a prison medical facility. It may be a little hard to see from this, but the bottom photo, the guy who's in his Christ-like pose here, is surrounded by gas, like clearly like a tear gas bomb or something has gone off, and he's just like, yeah, loving it. So this is for a medical facility. So gas, weapons, menace, attack, crush, there's any number of words that come to mind of like you're saying, very us versus them. This is army like, this is militant, this is let's deliver some pain. That was definitely my experience as well in prison, is like there's a certain like element of like rah-rahness of like sort of like it's a gang.
Fuck around and find out.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what it is.
I've heard it said like the worst gang in prison is the Department of Corrections, and this looks like this is kind of holding true with this flyer here. And like you're saying, this is clearly appealing to a certain mindset. This is like, you want to be powerful, you want to get some like weapons, you want to be a part of like this like big furious thing, you want to crush some motherfuckers, like we are the employer for you.
I mean, I don't want to get like too far into the deep end with like politics and socioeconomics, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention some of this stuff, which is the police union in the United States just sent excess weapons to support Ukraine. That just happened. There are so many weapons with our police and Department of Corrections that they were able to safely send some to support another country in a war.
Oh, we got plenty. We're good. Yeah.
And these are the people that like are supposed to be there to protect and serve and keep communities safe. And all they have done is escalate. Everything is about escalation. And so I like to sometimes when we're having these discussions, give you the argument from the other side. If somebody's watching this, they're saying, well, you're dealing with violent people either in these neighborhoods, if you're a police officer, or in prison, and you have to have some level of security and safety. It's not the responsibility of people in prison or in these communities to de-escalate. It's not the responsibility of somebody who is a gang leader, for instance, to be the one that de-escalates. It's the responsibility of our taxpayer-led officials to be the ones that take the first step in higher education, de-escalation. Kevin and I work at a homeless shelter. We deal with violence on a weekly basis. Right? Mm-hmm. Not one person at this homeless shelter, which by the way, used to be a Florida prison, carries a gun, a weapon, mace. All of the de-escalation is done by us. There's no tactical training. There's no self-defense training. All of it is done with heart and emotions and language and diplomacy. We prove it on a daily basis that if you care about someone and you love them and you're there literally to keep them safe, that you can do de-escalation without weapons.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do if you just show up for somebody in the moment. The prison that I was at, it was one of a training facility too. So like when people see this flyer, perhaps, or a flyer, they were like, oh, that's a job for me. They get hired there. Or maybe they came into it with like not really realize, maybe it was like, I think this would be a good job for me, for whatever reason, whether it's with sinister or genuine. I saw it all the time where somebody would come in, they go through the training, they're a little like wide-eyed their first day, like, oh shit, like I'm in a prison, intimidated, a little like, oh my God. And then slowly turning into like, oh shit, I can exercise power over these people who we have captive here. And you can see him start to like, go from a place of like being genuine to a place of like, oh, I'm joining into the gang of the meatheads who are running this place, and I'm going to start, doing whatever to the prisoners. And so I would see people like, walk through guards, walk through the dorm. You have your little locker where everything is like Tetris in there. You could have a blindfold on and find anything in your locker because you know exactly where everything is.
Which I did, by the way, because my buddies blacked out all the numbers on my master lock. It's the greatest gag of all time.
So I've seen officers come in, pick up a locker, flip it upside down, and just keep walking.
Yeah,
there was no purpose to that. That was only to be a bully, to be a small dicked fucking bully.
Yeah,
and just fuck with the person who can't respond in any way because like you got him by the balls. You know what I mean? Like what are you gonna do? Like it's like, go ahead, do something then. Do
right,
something.
do
And,
something, right?
yeah,
Fuck around and find out. And what's crazy about all this, as we're telling you this, some people are watching this for the first time and going, we didn't know it was like that. Some people maybe have an opposing point of view. What's insane to me is all of this that we're discussing is done with a license. It's done with this sort of subtext of, you put yourself here, you did whatever it was. I'm looking at your jacket right now, and there is 3 stolen cars, a robbery, armed home invasion. So now that you did those things, you may or may not have done them. You may just have signed the plea just to get it over with, right? That's a whole other world of problems we're dealing with. You get here, and then you're subjected to this type of like us versus them and abusive mentality with a license, because you can always go, you did these things. You did this to this community, so now I get to do this to you. Yeah. That's the mentality.
And even if, you know, as a prisoner, if you say you're abused, say a guard hurts you in some way physically, you can complain to the guards.
Right.
you complain.
Who are their buddies? You
complain to the prison about the prison, which is very hard to break out of that communication sort of that sort of fortress they kind of seal you in. Like,
it's a loop.
Yeah, it's hard to get outside of that, to get anyone to hear what you're saying. So maybe you can contact somebody on the outside, maybe hopefully through a phone call. Messages are harder now because everything is like digitally observed. So if you can maybe contact somebody on the outside, but it's very hard. So if, you know, somebody sees this flyer, maybe they are like, this is great. I love this. I want to wear a vest. I want to go stomp on some motherfuckers. I want a green light to abuse people.
Yeah, I fought it. Let's be honest here. I fought in Afghanistan. I fought in Iraq. I've come home. I don't have a lot of opportunities right now. I have PTSD. I got to stomp on motherfuckers with a license over there. I'm going to come home and do it here.
Could be.
That's where a lot of this comes from.
That could be somebody's leaning. Yeah. And so then you go in there and it's like, yeah, they can kind of get away with it for almost indefinitely for some of them, just because it's a closed loop. It's hard to like actually complain to somebody and like actually get any sort of actual, I don't know, quote, justice for being abused while you're inside. It's very hard. So
yeah, because a lot of times if you complain, they'll come round you up and disappear you.
Oh,
they'll put you on a bus. They'll send you to another prison. You get there, dress out. They'll put you right back on a bus, send you to another prison. You could be riding on that bus for months. That's just one tactic. They could throw you in solitary confinement. They could beat you up. They could threaten you. And I've watched this happen. Yep. I've watched guys get all of their stuff taken, rounded up, and you never saw this person again.
I mean, no matter what you think, I don't think anyone could look at this flyer and think anything other than this agency, whoever this may be. I mean, you know, take the logo off, pretend like you don't know what this is. You certainly wouldn't think that this is an organization who has the motto, when they succeed, we succeed. Or like transforming lives, or transforming Florida one life at a time, or something, whatever it is.
Right.
Like this obviously is dissonant with the messaging, like, you know, like the forward facing verbiage that's used. Like visually, what they are soliciting, what they are appealing to, what they are requesting, what they are desiring is their employees to be turned on by this imagery here. You're only going to get one thing with this. Like, you cannot sell me on the idea that like, oh no, this is actually like, this is care, this is transformation, this is rehabilitation, this is reform. None of that. This is like straight up punishment. This is straight up like militant crushing.
And most victims and victims' families don't want this. This is not somehow justice. And there's a lot of restorative justice groups now that are having elevated, complex, complicated dialogue about what victims' families and the victims themselves want to see,
what they actually
want, and be involved in these courtrooms and these situations. And we're going to have guests on in the future that are working on restorative justice. It doesn't always have to be punitive. From the courtroom through the prison system, it is. And 24,361 full-time DOC officers. They make $30,000 to $60,000 a year. In 2016, 2017, the last fiscal year that we have data for, 9,669 use of force against inmates.
That state?
That's in the state of Florida. Almost 10,000 out of the 170,000 people that are locked up, so 1 in 17 people, is that right? Am I doing the math right there? Are gonna have a situation where that force is used against them. And that's just reported, Kevin.
Right. I was gonna say
That's the reported
that's not the laundry
statistics.
room. The laundry room statistics.
Easily double it.
Yeah. So,
Easily.
I mean, there's cameras are pretty prevalent now, although that they didn't exist when I was in there, and they were installed shortly before I left. So that was sort of a new thing.
How often did they not work?
Yeah, like so. Yeah, they don't work conveniently.
Right.
Or people knew where the blind spots were, so officers
Yep.
would take, like the laundry room was a really common spot because there's no cameras in there, so somebody's writing grievances, trying to like get help with something on the outside
For anything, improve
could
food,
be.
more books.
AC doesn't work. Yeah, they're starving us, they're burning us, they're freezing us, water is tainted, showers don't work, there's molds. Now I'm living with black mold, whatever it is. Conditions are not what they are meant to be. And that person could be like, hey, come into the laundry room with 4 or 5 officers, close the door, and you hear, you hear it as the prisoner is sitting on your bed. You hear the the impact, the sound of fist boots hitting a person, and then like that's it. And there's no way to back up anyone's claim of violence, officer on prisoner violence, just because it's done out of sight.
This is happening in real time in the United States of America.
Right
and
now, right now.
Kevin spoke to the micro part of this, which is on a granular level. You get beat up, you can't get the information to your family, you can't get justice, you can't get help. That's the small day-to-day incidents, right? But like, take that and extrapolate it out. The bigger view is you can't get help legislatively or with the public, which is one of the reasons we're doing this show, because most people either don't know about it, they don't know these things are going on, or they turn a blind eye to it because it's too painful. It's like what we see with people experiencing homelessness. They're out there, these are real human beings who are lonely, traumatized, have been emotionally and physically and sexually abused, and they're just panhandling for a few dollars. And you roll your window up and lock your doors and don't look over at the problem because it's too painful. Or you take it one step further and make up a story. You make up a story about how that guy probably has a couple $100,000 and he's making more money than you. And why shouldn't you just get a job and work? All the stories that you make up and that you hear about people experiencing homelessness, the same thing happens with the criminal justice system. People don't know about it. They turn a blind eye, or they make up a story. They make up a story about how people deserve this treatment, that they somehow were a detriment to their community or society, and they deserve to be treated this way. And if you didn't like it, then you shouldn't have put yourself there. That's why we can't ever see any change. And then you have these people that were in rural areas, didn't have a lot of opportunities. They're ex-military, they're police officers that got kicked off the force for being abusive or whatever it was. They take this job and they know they have a license to do this stuff because they know that the general public doesn't know, turns a blind eye, or has made up a story.
The other thing too is a lot of people think, we'll just operate under the assumption that prison abuse is actually happening because we know it's a real thing. It doesn't just stay within the fence line or the walls of the prison. That actually comes home. Like the person that works there, the person who is distributing the torture, they come home after the end of their shift, they go to the grocery store, they're next to us in traffic, they're somebody's neighbor, it's somebody's maybe spouse or parents. There's a high incidence of domestic abuse, of suicide, of alcoholism. It's not like it contains itself to the actual property line of the prison. That permeates into our community, the tendrils of the prison system. They're present out here on the street in places that might be subtle or maybe like a little invisible to some people. But if you think about it for more than a few seconds, you can realize like that actually does come home. Like that comes home, that enters into our society, that enters into our community in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, the people that are making your food and serving you and driving you places and cleaning up your grandma's bedpan and like all the like little jobs that you have the ability to get when you come home from prison. Think about the psychological ramifications of that. Like, these are people that are going to have to reintegrate back into society, and like they're sitting in their car crying because they got pulled over for speeding or making a U-turn or whatever it was. Like, do you want that person like that's like emotionally and psychologically and mentally unstable, unhealthy, doesn't have a good support system? Do you want them like operating in the same space as you? We want help people that are healthy and have support. So this is not something that like you can just watch this YouTube video, listen to this podcast and go, it really sucks, but what can I do?
Doesn't affect me.
Right. It does affect you.
Yeah, it affects everybody. I think like I will say like the prison system is one of the things that like the longer you look at it, the uglier it becomes. Like the more you sort of like
it's kind of like you.
Totally. Absolutely true. I'm getting uglier by the fucking second. No, like the more you see, like pay attention, like, oh, this is what's really going on here. This is like how this relates to this. Like it actually gets uglier and uglier. It doesn't like gain credibility or gain like somehow like, oh, there is like some real benefit to this in my mind, or you know, like it trends the other way for me. And I think that's true for most people who would look at it with any sort of like sensible, I don't know, reason. Basically.
You do have a lot of people doing a lot of good work legislatively, in the criminal justice side of it, in the prison reform side of it. You have people that have been through the system and are lending their talents and their brain and their heart and their bodies to changing this, but it's incremental and slow. And a lot of stuff ends up like all the stuff that you read in the paper, because you know, like the average person who pays like a little bit of an attention and maybe listens to NPR and goes, hey, I put up a yard sign in my yard and you know, I vote blue or whatever it is. They hear about like prison reform, but you're hearing about the federal prison reform. Hardly any of this stuff that gets changed affects the state prison system.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So
yeah, I know when Emily was here, Emily Westerholm, some weeks ago.
I went to her seminar 2 weeks ago.
Tried to go to the next
it was
one.
so good.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
The words evidence-based came up a few times in our conversation. And I feel like that can't be highlighted enough, that like, why are we not operating from a place of reality? Like there's so much stuff that's just like, well, we've got so much momentum in our current way of doing business, even though everything demonstrates factually that this is a bad idea. We're just going to keep going because that's what we do.
Full steam ahead.
It's fucking crazy. I mean, like you wouldn't do that in any other business.
Right.
It's
the only thing that we know. So we'll just keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully, I mean, there's a very, very slow incremental change of people advocating for and pushing for evidence-based, reality-based solutions to what's going on. So hopefully that's something that will continue to trend. And, you know, it's like turning a tanker ship. Fucking takes forever, takes sustained effort, takes a long time. It's a fucking grind. But, you know, hopefully that's something that's dawning.
I mean, we are Uncarcerated, by the way. Follow us on Twitter at Uncarcerated. Like, rate, and subscribe. This show, I think, is involved. There's a handful of other podcasts. There's a lot of people doing really good work, and I think we're on the beginning. If you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, I think we are on the precipice of radical change in the United States in prison reform, and I think it'll happen very quickly. But right now it's slow, and there's a lot of resistance for all the reasons aforementioned. But one of the reasons things don't change, I'm going to use a sports analogy here for a second, so feel free to not listen to me. God, I got to get your jersey to you. Damn it, I forgot it again. It's going to be like a running joke. I got Kevin and Lamar Jackson jersey, and I keep forgetting it.
Sweet Lamar Jackson.
So I'm going to check my car one more time before I go. So there was a high school football coach who is now a college coach at the Division III level in South Carolina. He refuses to punt, and he goes for it on 4th down on every play. Have you heard about this guy?
Yeah.
So he won like 7 state championships at the high school level in a row. They hire him at this Division III program, and they've won like 3 championships in a row at the Division III level. And I think they've punted like 8 times in 5 years, and they go for it on 4th down. Now, for those of you, I'm not going to explain what any of this means if you don't know sports. Basically, it's a radical departure from the conservative tradition that has lived for 100 years in football. And so he said he went to a coaches conference and the other coaches like shunned him. They were like, you're ruining the game, that, you know, you don't know what you're doing. It's about tradition. This will never work. And he was like, it's working. And he said that they like, right. And they like wouldn't let him sit at the table with them. And I just thought about like, what other parts of society do you see that in where something very clearly could work? You know, like, I don't know if you've seen Don't Look Up, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, sure. That's a radical idea. It looks like it works on paper. Maybe now you've proven it to work, evidence-based practice, but it's not the way things are done. That happens all the time.
Yeah, that's not the American way, bro. That is not how we do business here. Yeah, that's fucked up. I mean, yeah, in the face of overwhelming evidence, the fact of like this is actually beneficial, to be like, nah, like, yeah, I don't like it. That's not how we did it 10 years ago. That's not how we did it 40 years ago. Like, it doesn't make sense. Nope. Like, it's just ignorance to the
economic justice, racial justice, all that, all those fields are affected by not just the nefarious powers that be, which are involved, but it's also affected by apathy and tradition. You know, tradition. What is tradition? It's just some dead guy's baggage. I can put it down.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I stole that from Doug Stanhope. I'm not gonna take credit for it. All right, so that's gonna do it for this episode.
What an uplifting, upbeat episode. This is a fucking hoot. This is a good one.
I'm gonna sit in my car and cry. I am going on vacation for a week. So, but when we get back, we have like 10 guests in a row lined up. So I think what's going to happen in May for you, the viewer, is you can probably count on 2 episodes a week because we've got a little bit of a log jam with some really, really fantastic guests, people that we know and love and care about and have amazing stories to tell, and we want to share them with you. So we've done a couple episodes in a row, just of us, topical. We've enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. Kevin, I love you. I love working with you. It's so much fun.
Me too.
I look forward to this like nothing else. And
speaking of logjam, find Lee on Grindr.
That's my nickname on Grindr. Logjam.
Awesome.
I had a good one the other day. It was a recipe online. It was like lemon frosted Oreo cookies. That's my nickname on Grindr.
Fucking great.
All right, that's gonna do it for us. Follow us at Uncarcerated on Twitter. Like, rate, and subscribe. Download the show. Whatever you can do, share it. We definitely. And if you have a story that you'd like to share, uncarceratedpod@gmail.com. That's uncarceratedpod@gmail.com. Kevin, see you when I get back.
See you, bud. Do not go work at a prison.